Hello and welcome to the 44 Minutes of Heaven we call the D1Baseball Podcast. I am your host, Michael Patrick Rooney. Tonight's episode and the D1 Baseball Top 100 Program Rankings are presented by KinaTrax. Already a standard across most of Major League Baseball, KinaTrax in-stadium systems allow teams to gain an edge by collecting and using in-game biomechanical data to enhance in-game performance, prevent injuries, monitor fatigue, and enhance player reports for scouts. KinaTrax in-stadium systems consist of multiple synchronized cameras capturing high-speed video zoomed in on the pitcher and the hitter. Biomechanical and data processing services are included so that the user can focus entirely on making use of the data. Learn more at KinaTrax.com. Speaking of biomechanical unicorns, I am joined tonight by the great Kendall J. Rogers, Aaron J. Fitt, Joseph J. Healy. Gentlemen, this evening is a rally pod. The reason it's a rally pod is because our beloved Carrots got absolutely curb stomped last week, I should say, week 7, set the franchise back at least a decade. The Klein Bengals, our beloved Klein Bengals, have a loss on their record now, and we go into the playoffs with a crisis of confidence. Fitzy's beloved Team North Carolina in the World Championship of Golf, while they did finish ahead of the outrageous team from France, they did not win the World Championship. And Joe's, our beloved Bocce squad, Bocce better have my money, just kind of bobbing and weaving right now. Just feels like we just can't find momentum. So, gentlemen, we come to you, Kendall. We're just not feeling it.
So I know there's a lot of negativity here, but I would like to congratulate Joe on his alma mater becoming bowl eligible. Same Houston State. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, really exciting times. Started FBS football last year 0-8. Finished, I think, the last season with 2 wins, but we're headed in the right direction, folks, with a rousing 10-7 win over FIU last week.
Wow.
Apparently, they had their post-game after party at Time to Spare, so there's that.
I mean, look, you got. I loved living in Huntsville, Texas. There are a few choices there in Huntsville, Texas. You know, you got shenanigans, you got the Jolly Fox. Yeah. But the pickings are slim.
Joe, you controversially, Bocce better have my money. It's named after a Rihanna song. If people want to look that up, you guys controversially lost. You called for a certain shot. Your teammate was not able to execute. Yeah. It's kind of like a pitching coach calling for the breaking ball 2-0 and it gets taken deep. And I don't understand why we're blaming the Bocce coach. I mean, just make a pitch, Bocce teammate.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that, but I'm not really in the business of
got to coach better.
Sussing out. Yeah, I just got to coach better. It was a gutsy call. I called for a knockout when there was a more conservative play to be made. We were playing really well. So and I stand by that. We lost both ends of a doubleheader the other night, but I thought we played well. Sometimes you just get beat. We lost 14-9 time limit game there, and we lost 15-11. Like those are both pretty close games in the bocce world. So we played well. We just got beat a couple times, but yeah, in that last game it was 11-11, and in the last round our opponent scored 4 points because I got a little greedy, and I, instead of playing defense and trying to minimize the number of points the opponent could score, I pushed to try to knock balls out so that we could maybe score some points, and it didn't work out in our favor, and so that's on me. We'll never know the counterfactual, of course, but I should have put my players in a better position to succeed.
Can't be afraid of the kill shot. Fitzy, I didn't get a chance to see the press conference following the World Championship of Golf. The Planet Earth World Championship, but what do you got on Team North Carolina? Will we be back? Do we need to upgrade the roster in the off season? What needs to happen?
No, proud of our squad, guys. We made the Final Four. We had a chance against the boys from NorCal. We had them right where we want them, and we let them off the hook, Runes. So if you want to crown them, you can crown them. That's fine.
I hope you played this tournament with one of those like American flag shirts with the Constitution on the front or the Declaration of Independence.
Gettysburg Address.
Our team's actually our team's called First Flight. We have a lot of aviation themes. Yeah, aviation themes running.
North Carolina. Yeah.
That's right. So anyway, proud of the guys. Great run for the.
That's well handled, gentlemen. So I think we have the therapy session can end there. The rally pod. Yeah. One of our fun topics this fall, the top 100 programs. I personally love it because, and this happens to all of us, we, like coaches and players take this seriously. Like, this is a big deal, and we get a lot of feedback on this. And what I love about the feedback we get, I got texts from 3 different coaches where they have granular opinions that you may agree or disagree with, but still, like, I love that feedback. I love the attention it gets. And so we're gonna talk about that. Let's start here. Ken, I'm gonna start with you, because you're the most prepared and the least prepared person at the same time. What was your favorite write-up that you did?
Oh, yeah, I'm definitely not prepared.
Do you want to pass and we can come back to you?
Well, so I'll say this. I'll just make a general observation real quick, and I'll come back. The one thing I actually find really interesting is that we put a lot of time and effort into doing these rankings, and when we all each have our own batch, we all kind of look through it and go, wait, like, I think I would have this team here and I'd have this team here. It's just really interesting, as much as we know about all these programs, that even when we still dig further into the numbers, that we tend to kind of move them around even more. So I thought that was kind of an interesting just takeaway from just always doing this exercise. I think for me, kind of the interesting batch, I'll start at the bottom. If you look at like the 91 through 100 group, Xavier 93, Fairfield, Fairfield sitting at 94. Cincinnati's a program that they've had did they change the name of their baseball park? It's not March Shot Field anymore, is it?
It's just UC Baseball Stadium.
That's what I thought. They've always had a pretty solid ballpark. They've got a great location. They finally have a coach in Jordan Bishel who had them on the cusp of the postseason last year. So seeing them in there was great. And then you have a program like Long Beach State sitting at 100, who's kind of at a really interesting spot in its program. You've got, NIL and things like that, driving kids away from the West Coast, but TJ Bruce, who certainly knows the winning formula there. So I just think some of the names there at the bottom, the Ivy League schools like, Penn and Columbia, being in that mix, it's just really interesting. A lot of names that I think, frankly, like if you polled people in college baseball, like fans, they might not have had some of those teams anywhere near their top 100.
I do like, to your point, Kendall, and then I'll start us with the favorite team we wrote up. I just love that this exercise takes us to all these different genres, Ivy League, Army's in there, like the argument for and against Fairfield, like all those conversations are really fun. So here was my favorite write-up, was San Diego, USD. And I'll tell you why I love that. I think I speak for the group when we think Brock Ungrich is a hell of a coach. Like, he's doing an awesome job. But I love that. So USD, here were 3 things that jumped out at me. They were number 53, by the way. And you start thinking about, it's a beautiful ballpark. It's super unique. It's one of the, San Diego is this idyllic place. And they were a top 8 seed in 2007. I don't know if that could ever be done again, but think about that. Like, a WCC school is a top 8 national seed in 2007. That was the Brian Mattis team. They had Chris Bryant in 2013. Like, the best player in America, you could argue, right? Or, in that top 3 conversation, the dude he out-homered 226 teams. Like, that kid picked USD. And again, Rich Hill was there, and Eric Valenzuela was there, Jay Johnson. And then, like, last year, USD was 20-4 in the WCC. Like that. And now, again, I don't want to say they dominated the league, because Portland was right there with them, 19-5. But the WCC is a good baseball league. And for USD to go 20-4, that's no joke. So I loved sinking my teeth into them, because, the duration, the length of their excellence, with some peaks and valleys, was fun. Joe, you go next. What's a fun one that you wrote up?
I was going to go with Fairfield, actually. Kendall mentioned it. And I love in this exercise that it's not the 100 highest ceiling programs. It's not the 100 programs with the most talent. It's not the 100 programs that have made the most noise in the postseason. It's this kind of mix of art and science to put this list together. And it's not just about some of the stuff we think about. In the top 10 or 20, sure, it's about how often do you get to Omaha and how often have you hosted, how many regionals in a row, stuff like that. Once you get to the bottom, though, like, you do have to kind of look at a full program resume. And the reality of the situation is that I think a lot of folks remember that 2021 run for Fairfield. They beat Arizona State. They get to a regional final. They go, whatever it was, their record in the Metro Atlantic was absurd. And a really talented team, by the way. There were good ball players in that team. But but they've also just dominated that league of late. And there's some other programs there that are going pretty well right now. Like Ryder has had a lot of good teams lately. Canisius obviously is typically pretty talented. And yet Fairfield just is continuing on as the best program in that conference. And I think that should count for something, that in their corner of the college baseball universe, the small conference in the Northeast, like Fairfield is running the game there. And I think that's just really impressive.
Go Stags. Fitzy, what say you?
First of all, I just want to compliment Coach Healy, Coach Rooney for answering the question. Not that I don't appreciate Kendall's ability to stall. Like,
It's
hey,
excellent.
listen, like that.
Dude,
It's a skill.
you know what? I don't know if any of you, other than Coach Rooney, would vote for me in a political election, but I would be a great
Agreed.
debater.
Like, just the ability to think on your feet. It's elite.
It'd be one of those things where, like, I would answer like a question about, immigration or something, and like I would give an answer, and like half the crowd would be like, "Oh, what the hell?" And then I'd be like, "But wait, there's more." And then the same people will be cheering for it.
I don't like it. I love it.
You're a national treasure.
Yes, that was well said.
For sure. I gotta shout out number 67, the Northeastern Huskies, because sticking to
Rise up,
brand.
Brookline.
Of course,
Look, it's just a neat program.
Yes.
But I spent enough time talking about Northeastern on this show over the last year. I just think it's really cool what they've built up there. But guys, I'm going to throw you a little curveball for my actual answer here. I don't think you guys are going to see this one coming. I'm going to snap it off here. I got to write up the Tennessee Volunteers.
Whoa.
Number 2, the reigning national champions, and I just think it's really cool to look at their case when you step back, and like the first 2 times we did this exercise, 2015 and 2017, they weren't in the top 100.
Crazy.
Right? Like they were not a top 100 program in college. But the reason for that was because they hadn't been to a regional since 2005. I mean, let alone Omaha or anything else. They hadn't done anything. They were just a bottom feeder in the league. And, they had talent at times, and they just, for whatever reason, for a variety of well-documented reasons, they just couldn't quite break through. And Dave Serrano, again, was a very good coach who took 2 different programs to the College World Series, and he couldn't break through there. And now you look at their rise. I mean, they jumped from unranked in 2017 in this exercise to number 69 in 2019. And they evolved to what, 17, I think, number 17 in 2022. 17. And now they're number 2. I mean, like, and the reason they're not number 1 is because LSU has a longer track record. Like, they both have a national title in the last 2 seasons. Tennessee's last 5 years are better than anybody's. We all know that. I mean, if this sample size was just the last 5 years, they're number 1. It's an incredible sample size. Our sample is a little longer than that because I think there's something to be said for sustaining success over a longer period of time. I mean, just look at the way we've seen some of these other programs like Ole Miss and Mississippi State kind of drop off, even Vanderbilt a little bit after winning the 2019 World Series. Like, we've seen some other SEC powers that had these great runs. Mississippi State had a great 4-year run, and they missed regionals 2 years in a row. And so we still need to see Tennessee prove they have the staying power, but I think we all believe that they do. And so, just hats off to that program. I mean, for sure, it's incredible what they've built. And I just thought, stepping back and kind of looking at that rise and breaking it all down, it was an interesting experience. I mean, I just think they're it's incredible. Like to go from unranked to number 2 in less than a decade is insane.
Just nuts. We're going to come back to the top 10 in a second. And by the way, Joe, Fairfield, you mentioned Fairfield that year in 21 did not lose a game until May 2nd. They were undefeated in March and April, and then lost their first game May 2nd. And you're right, Fitzy, the Tennessee thing. We'll come back to that. I'm sure we'll talk about them again. Kendall, what was a program that you enjoyed writing up? Or go for it.
Well, that wasn't the next question we had on there, was it?
You really...
No, that was the first question that you stalled your way through. Listen, let's just give him a pass, Coach. He doesn't remember what we wrote up.
You want to stay in the top 10?
Hey,
you want to go in the top 10? You want to talk about the top 10? That might make...
No. I'll give you a program because I'm the local Northeastern homer.
Yeah.
New England homer, I guess you'd call it.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with UConn at 26. Speaking of teams that have made a really impressive climb, they've gone from 60 to 57 to 36 to 29. And this is a program that, No offense to the Huskies, but this is the program that is the class of New England. Jim Penders has had a winning, consistent tradition. They've been in multiple super regionals. It fits been to their ballpark up there. They've done a really nice job with their facilities. They just seem like a program that just has everything clicking, and it seems like they're a program that even when they lose guys, like was it a couple years ago they lost a lot of guys from that team. Last year they're in the regional at Norman. They're good every single season now, and I think people sometimes can maybe just gloss over like how difficult that is for a New England program.
I think it's so impressive what they've done in terms of they play a difficult schedule in non-conference a lot of times by design, and also you add the factor in they have to play on the road the first 4 or 5 weeks of the season, especially on the weekends. And I've just gotten to a point now where I'm going to stop worrying about anything I see from UConn before like mid-March, because every year we're looking up at the end of February in early March and they're like 7-8 or, whatever. And we're just like, is this the year that UConn kind of slips up, takes a step back? And the answer is always no. And so I think I'm just done worrying about them until much later in the season.
Well, and here's the other thing too I think about as I look back at these rankings. Imagine telling Jim Penders the day he took the job at UConn that you, in a program ranking, you would be ahead of Arizona, Clemson, Georgia, Oregon, Miami, South Carolina, and Alabama. Like, he probably would have thought you were on something if you would have said that the day he took the UConn job.
I mean, especially if you told him that Oregon had a baseball team, he'd be like, "Whoa, what are you smoking?"
About 20 spots ahead of Arizona State. Not even in the same neighborhood.
Yeah.
Hey, let's do the top. Let's talk about the top 10. We can just do this as a group. But let me read it off if you're driving. Sure. And so number 1 was LSU, number 2 was Tennessee, number 3 was Florida, number 4 Vandy, 5 Arkansas, 6 Virginia, 7 Texas A&M, 8 Mississippi State, 9 Texas, 10 Florida State. Let me couch this for you guys and then have at it. Maybe Joe, you can kick us off. I felt like the 2 areas of this top 10 where we spent the most time was LSU versus Tennessee, and then should Florida be in that conversation? But LSU versus Tennessee was a big discussion, I felt like. And then Mississippi State, Texas, and Florida State, and maybe you could even throw Stanford in 11. I felt like we kind of were all over the place with those programs, like it was really fine lines. So, Joe, you kick us off, and what stands out about those things?
Yeah, I was actually going to say that the consistency, if you look back in the entirety of the data we've been doing for basically 10 years now, the consistency of Florida and Vanderbilt, where their rankings are like 2, 3, 1, 2, and 3, right? Or whatever. I'm not looking at it, but you know what I mean.
Vanderbilt had only been 1 or 2 until this year when they slipped to 4.
Right. And even there, like that was actually, Aaron leads me right to my second point, which is just that, as much as we maybe are starting to wonder about Vanderbilt's viability with LSU and Tennessee and A&M and whoever else in this new era of college baseball, they still deserve a lot of credit for what they have done not that long ago. Like, I feel like one of the great forgotten things in college baseball is that Vanderbilt was 1 win away from winning a national title in 2021. That's not that long ago. And so, but it seems like we've kind of all just moved on from that and kind of are making assumptions about the program. And those concerns are valid. That's a conversation for another day. But the consistency those programs have had is just absolutely staggering. And it wasn't until I kind of looked at that year by year of those 2 programs where that really sank in for me.
Go ahead, Fitzy. What say you about that top 10?
I already kind of touched on LSU, Tennessee. I think, but real quick on that, I just think LSU kind of reasserting itself as the premier program is something that has been, I mean, they have been, since we started this exercise, they've been a top 10 program. The lowest rank they had was 7, which was like after the Maneri transition. And there was a little more uncertainty at that time in 2022. What was the future going to look like? But the way that they kind of rebounded, obviously won a national title. And, I mean, they've got it all going for them, and they always have. I mean, they've got the history, and they've got, the facilities and the fan bases and the resources and just, the mystique and all that stuff. Right. But like over the previous 15 years, they weren't quite like at that peak that they were in the 90s. I mean, just call it what it is. And now they've kind of climbed their way back there, and yeah, it's a conversation between LSU and Tennessee, but like if you look at the fact that LSU was still very good for the entire last decade, they just weren't quite at the very pinnacle. And now they reached the pinnacle in 2023, and they have the extended history and everything else that they have going for them. And I just think that they're a deserving choice at the top. Although it was an interesting discussion. So that's my quick thought on LSU. Mississippi State, though, I think also to me is interesting because it's like, what do you do with those guys? I mean, there's not a lot of programs that have won a national championship in the last 4 years, and Ole Miss is also in that bucket. Now, Mississippi State had a longer stretch of excellence before their national title than Ole Miss did. They had 3 straight Omaha runs. They had 4 straight super regionals, and Mississippi State bounced back this year and made it back into the postseason. And so that kind of cushioned their fall a little bit, but they still slipped, 5 spots from last time. I think they had climbed number 3 last time. Is that right? So, what do you do with those guys? But like they still have the best facility in the country for my money. I don't think anyone really would argue with me on that, right? Arkansas fans would argue with me, but they have the best facility in the country. Their fan base is enormous. Like there's so much to sell. When you go to Dudy Noble, it feels so big time. And yes, the competition in the SEC is fierce as ever, more fierce than ever. But like, they've gotten a little bit of a pass for missing regionals 2 years in a row, but that's partly because they did rebound this past year. But that's one where I'm curious what it looks like in 2 more years. Where do they stand? Do they go back up? Do they kind of hold steady, or do they fall more? And the SEC is kind of like that. I just think we're going to see a lot of movement up and down in the years to come, just with the new look of that league.
Hey, Kendall, so on those 3 programs, what's interesting to me is all 3 programs either made a coaching change or flirted with one, and yet they're still top 10 programs. How does that grab you, KR?
Yeah. Well, the big thing with A&M, and I think Fit might have responded to a Twitter question about this a week or so ago. But the thing about A&M that's really interesting is, if not for a coaching change, I mean, they might even be higher. They're probably ahead of Virginia, if not for the coaching change. So, I mean, where A&M is a pretty good indicator of where they are as a program and where they're going to be in 2025 when you consider their entire coaching staff other than Mike Early left. So, they're in a pretty good spot. I mean, we'll see what they are in 2 years. Obviously, they're going to be really good this year. We'll see what they are in 26. Texas, I think the 2 teams for me, guys, in this top 10 that I'm pretty bullish on that will be higher in our next iteration are Texas and Florida State. I'm all in on Florida State right now. They went from 13 to 10 after what they did last year. I think Link Jarrett's got a lot of momentum. The roster for them going into next year is really good. I just think he's a superstar. I think that 1 year was just a total outlier. I'm really bullish on them. And then Texas, if you look at what they've done in recruiting so far in the future classes, big shocker, Nolan Cain's killing in the recruiting trail. So I just think Texas with Jim and that staff there, they're going to do some really big things. So I think the big thing for me, I think Texas and Florida State will inch their way up. But as to Aaron's point, does Mississippi State keep them from doing that? Does Texas A&M keep them from moving up in the pecking order? It remains to be seen.
Hey, boys, so let me give you this. So if you include Stanford at 11, and this just makes me sick to my stomach. I should be careful, but like Stanford, let me explain why it makes me sick to my stomach. I'm about to say Stanford is an ACC school. That really makes me sick to my stomach because it means the Pac-12 has imploded, and now I have to live with that. But that's, of course, I love the ACC in baseball. And then North Carolina's 12. So here's where I'm going with this. Of the top 12, 8 are SEC programs, 4 are ACC programs. When I think of the 2025 season, I think we're going to have all 8 teams in Omaha are going to be SEC and ACC teams again, unless we have a major upset. And as someone who loves the Big 12 in baseball, that really doesn't sit well with me. But if I'm just putting my emotions aside, that's how I really feel. Like I feel like Omaha is a 2-conference tournament right now. I kind of hate that. But you guys tell me, am I being emotional, or does that feel like a real thing right now?
I mean, the odds of being in your favor. I mean, somebody like Oregon State could have something to say about that, but like the odds are certainly in your favor.
I actually think I would look at it a bit of a different way. And I would say, because I understand what Kendall's saying and I don't fundamentally disagree with him, but I would actually say the odds are actually in the favor of weird stuff happening, right? I mean, it's 2 years ago Oregon was there. And had they not won that super regional, Oregon would have. So, I just think more than anything else, I think the larger point is right, Runes. Like, we're just living in a world where I think it's going to be routine for there to be 6, 7, or 8 teams from those two leagues combined in Omaha. But the situation is that a lot of it just depends on how the bracket falls, right? One year you get Oklahoma State paired up against, pick your other team from not that conference, right? And suddenly you've got, Oklahoma State and Maryland in a super regional. Well, obviously that's going to break up those two conferences. So much of it is just like the way the bracket breaks. So I agree with your sentiment of emotion there, Runes. I like the variety. It's one of the reasons I fell in love with this sport. But I do think it's just kind of where we are.
And I think a couple things. I think, first of all, we have to kind of re-envision our concept of variety in this day and age. Conference, what do conferences even mean anymore? Yeah. If Stanford and Cal are in the Atlantic Coast Conference, then like who cares?
That's so true.
Conference? Like it's still geographic diversity, right? If Stanford gets to Omaha just because they're in the ACC, it's not like, oh geez, like it's anyway. I don't know what to make of that.
That's a great point, because I've actually had to stop myself, Phil. I mean, we're not to get us a little more off track here, but I've actually had to stop myself where, I've mourned a little bit the loss of the Pac-12 as a great baseball conference and not as much lately, but just historically. And then I have to kind of remind myself that like Oregon State baseball still exists. Like, and I don't just mean them because they're kind of like the best, most consistent program out there. Like Cal baseball still exists, right? Like those teams are still going to play. They just are going to play in a weird conference, or in Oregon State's case, not in a conference at all for this year. So I've kind of had to almost stop myself and be like, yeah, it sucks, but like if Arizona and Arizona State and whoever else is going to be good, they can do Big 12. Like that is also an option.
I do want to touch on another thing here, which is Oregon State. Since this is just kind of a random free-flowing conversation at this point in the podcast, but Oregon State was one of those flashpoint teams. Is that the right word? A team that gained some traction on social media where we had them ranked, which was 13. And look, certainly if you look at the 21st century, Oregon State has 3 national titles in the 21st century, which is that's more than anyone else, right?
Yeah, no, they have the 3 is the most since 2007, or whenever their first one was 2006.
If you count 2000, then LSU has 3, but 2000 technically is the 20th century. But anyway, the point is like Oregon State would be clearly like in the top 3 probably if you were to list programs of this century. But like for this exercise, I think it's important to lay out. We're talking about the state of the program right now. And part of that is looking at recent history and the factors there. And like, it is worth noting that Oregon State has not been to Omaha without Pat Casey. And we all like Mitch Canham, and Mitch Canham's done a great job. And I think it's only a matter of time before they get there, but like they have not been to Omaha with the current regime there. And so, I mean, it's been since 2018, right? That's a little, it's so that's one reason that they slipped some in the rankings. They were 5 last time around. They're 13 this time around. Another is the conference situation it adds instability.
100%.
And I get that they built a nice schedule this year, but it's also a very road heavy schedule, and we'll see how they handle that. But like, how sustainable is that over the long term? I think it's very fair to have questions about that.
And it's, I think you're like top 13 programs in the country. This is rarefied air, and we're splitting hairs. And for Oregon State, like you really needed to pop in Omaha in 2002 or 2022 when you were like a top 3 national seed, or like really challenge Kentucky last year where they just were kind of flat in that super regional and just didn't look right. And so, but you're right, Fitzy. Like it'll be interesting to see how it goes. So let me fast forward us from here. So I want to give us each a chance to mention a program that didn't make it. I will probably steal the most popular choice, but like, by the way, as I reimagine the Big Ten in baseball, I actually think Oregon is the best baseball program in the Big Ten right now. Like they feel like I don't know where it stands in the rankings, but they feel like the most viable program to me in the Big Ten. But my just missed program is USC, who I think was 101, if I'm not mistaken. Yep, Southern Cal was 101. And, the problem is they've got They made a regional in 2005 and 2015 and nothing since. I would argue 2 years ago, they're 17 and 12 in the Pac-12. They should have been in, right? Like, no offense to Arizona, but you're 5 games ahead of a team that gets in. I just think for USC, even though we love that coaching staff, you don't have a field right now. Who knows when that fixes itself. You're going to a league that, it's really hard to know how the Big Ten feels about college baseball in this new House settlement era. And you don't have those regional appearances in the bank account to, so I think USC just missed clearly, and we're all very bullish on them, but there's just enough uncertainty there that they get squeezed out. Joe, you want to give us? Oh, go ahead, Fitzy.
And is it one regional since Mike Gillespie was their head coach?
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
Like for USC, that's it. Like that's not a
Yeah.
lot. It's a combination of those things. Like they haven't really earned their way in, and they have this other uncertainty going on. But I just think the Big Ten in general. First of all, you're right. Oregon is the number 1 ranked program for us in the Big Ten at 32. But like it's interesting. There's like a cluster of them shortly thereafter. UCLA 40, Indiana 41, Maryland 42, Nebraska 43, Michigan 44. And I think that's a fascinating group of programs that have all done things like legitimate big time things over the last decade, and they've all had their kind of ebbs and flows. And in Michigan's case, they almost won a national title. In UCLA's case, they did win a national title, but it was out. It was more than 10 years ago now, and they haven't been to Omaha since. So anyway, there's just I think that's a fascinating group of programs, and I'm so curious to see what the future looks like for the Big Ten.
Yep. Joe, you want to give us a team that just missed the top 100?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Creighton. I think they're in an interesting spot. First of all, I think they have a lot going for them, right? Obviously, there are downsides to playing where they do at Charles Schwab, but I think there's also upsides to that, right? Certainly the quality of the facilities are better than what you would assume for a program of its stature, given that it gets to use that stadium. Location as well. I mean, look, there's a big brother in that from a baseball standpoint in that state with the Cornhuskers, but Creighton is also a big brand name in a big city there in the Midwest. So you like that. I also think Mark Kingston, a pretty inspired hire, honestly. Now, obviously, one more year of Ed Service, and then Mark Kingston takes over. But if he can do what he did at Illinois State and South Florida, I have a lot of confidence that he could do something similar at Creighton. Obviously, it's a different set of challenges, particularly with USF, but I think it's easy to assume that, he won at USF and that's easy because that place is in Tampa, and but that job is tougher than I think people realize. It was a little bit behind in terms of facilities and what have you, and he did a really nice job there. So I like where they're at, and on top of that, they've only made one regional in 10 plus years, which always kind of surprises me because it seems to me that most years they're pretty good, and it just kind of feels like they don't tend to get the breaks. And also with the Big East being a 4-team conference tournament, they don't really have a chance to be that 6 seed that gets hot at the right time, right, and works their way through it. So, or at least the Big East tournament having been mostly a 4-team tournament in recent past. So they just haven't had that chance to kind of break through. So it's a team that their postseason results, I don't think totally match how good that team is year in and year out. So, they get a couple different breaks, and I think they're probably a program that's in the 70s or 80s here, right? I think that's actually closer to what their quality has been the last 10 years.
Joe, just to clarify, Nebraska, their hashtag, the good life. So, I don't think we can mention Creighton's baseball program without mentioning the quality of living and life.
Thank you for cleaning that up, Runes.
Yeah,
I
go
appreciate
Skurs. Fitzy, what say you? Who's your team outside the top hundo?
Well, I'm pretty intrigued by what the future holds for Fresno State. A program that, as we all know, had a glorious moment.
Wonder Dogs.
Back in the Wonder Dogs back in 2008.
Moon still, baby.
Won it all. And then it was just kind of like a gradual slide for a while after that. I mean, they had a couple of little spikes where like they maybe, got hot and won a conference tournament or whatever. And that's kind of what happened this past year too, is they won the Mountain West Conference tournament and got back into a regional for the first time in a while. But I don't know. I think with Ryan Overland there, a younger guy that has been in the program a long time and is now running the show. I still think with all the things that they have to offer with their history and their facilities, and I think you can get players out there. I think that they care about baseball out there. You know, it's kind of weird that they're outside the top 100, but I feel like that's if we're looking at programs outside the top 100 that I would buy on, I think that's a program that we've seen their upside as a program. I think that they can, they got more runs in them. I'm buying on.
Hey, and how about another great example? Like they keep their third baseman Murph Gray, who's a 6'4", 220-pound athletic dude that has been productive. And like I'm as guilty of anyone as lamenting the transfer portal and all that type of stuff. But like there's so much, the retention of good players, and Fresno State being a great example, is so much better than it's been. Yeah, there's a lot to like there. 100%. Joe, I cut you off. Go ahead.
No, it's no worries, Rins. I'm going to assume their Wikipedia page is accurate on this, but according to the Fresno State baseball Wikipedia page, their NCAA tournament appearances, which are at 30 plus now, are ranked in the top 10 all time.
Coach Bennett, man.
Like, I'm going to assume that's correct, but just kind of, one of those. And as I look here, it's like it looks like they were kind of in a regional every year throughout the 80s and early 90s. So yeah, it's to Aaron's point, like a lot more history. I mean, yes, the 08 national title, you put that on a pedestal, but even beyond that, like more consistent program than I think I've certainly given them credit for historically.
And by the way, Mike Batesel, if we were ranking retirements, he would be top 5.
He's crushing it.
Living in Montana, has not had a haircut or a shave since he moved there 2 years ago or whenever it was. Just glorious. Coach Batesel, if you're listening, which you're not, hat tip you.
Right. Do we think Coach Batesel has internet where he lives in Montana? I hope not.
Too.
I honestly hope
if
not.
The answer is no.
I hear he's going to star in Harry and Henderson's too.
Could. It's so glorious. He always had a great salad. Kendall, Nate, give us a program that didn't quite make it.
There will be no smiling during this one. I'm going to go pretty negative here, unfortunately. Sorry, guys. Usually pretty positive. I'm going to highlight the Rice Owls. This is a program that the first time we did this in 2015, they were the 20th ranked program in America. Since then, they've gone 20, 23, 35, 78, and now sitting well into the 100s. The question for me is, whether it's Jose Cruz Jr., another coach in a couple of years, like, can anyone in the modern era in college baseball turn this program back into a national juggernaut? Like, it's a very, very legitimate question right now. And the crazy thing about Rice, I'll give you guys some trivia. How close has Rice, in terms of like games under 500, how close has Rice gotten to finishing 500 in conference since the COVID year?
I'd say 5 games within 500 is the closest they've gotten.
I'm going to take the. I think it's more than 5 games.
I was going to say 7.
It's 5. They have not. They've only finished, and it was this past year. They've only finished one season in conference play since the COVID year. 5 games under 500. They have not finished a season with a winning conference record since 2017.
Wow,
that's unbelievable.
I mean, we're talking about a program that at one point, I mean, hell, in the last decade, was mentioned in lockstep with Texas. Yeah. I mean, so it's just remarkable to see what's happened to this program. I would love nothing more than for those guys to kind of get back on their feet, become a prominent program again. But it's honestly just an astonishing fall from grace.
Yeah, it's a great chance for me to do a plug, Kendall. So the Sunday night conversations have been awesome, but Joe and I have one with on the OG on right. So it's going to be Joe and I co-hosting with David Pierce and Patrick Hallmark, and just it's you talk about moving heaven and earth to create a baseball program. Like what Wayne Graham did at Rice just gets more remarkable by the year, right? Like it's just unbelievable what he turned a college baseball program out of thin air, like a national power. It's nuts.
Yeah. Him, Pat Casey, and Augie Garita probably for my money did the 3 best coaching jobs in the history of college baseball. Augie at Fullerton, obviously Pat at Oregon State, and of course the OG at Rice.
I agree with that list. I'll throw Gene Stevenson into the mix.
Oh yeah.
From literally nothing at Wichita State.
I will say this, like Florida, I mean, if you're throwing teams in, like coaches in, like I get that people want to bang on the guy for not winning a national championship, but like Mike Martin's like regional run is outrageous. Like that's
Yeah, the
silly.
number, the Mike Martin stat that blows you away is that if you were a young coach and you happen to get a Division I job at age 25 and you retired at age 65 and you never won less than 50 games, you didn't catch Mike Martin. Think about what I just said. You coached for 40 years and you never won less than 50 games. You just finished second all time in wins. And I get
It's
it. Yeah, there's different factors,
unbelievable.
but
What I always think about is how in the world did 11 not have a team that, two of his weekend starters got hurt and like his 3 or 4 hole hitter got hurt and they just narrowly didn't make a regional. Like how in the world did that not happen in that amount of time? It just blows my mind.
Oh yeah, I mean it happened to like peak UNC occasionally. They go 13-17 and end up on the wrong side.
crazy.
And UVA, and like
Yeah.
even like Arkansas has had a
Texas.
blip, or LSU's had a blip, like where they just missed the regional, right? Like Texas, I mean, come on,
So
like
crazy.
everybody, it's nuts.
Yeah, their record, them and Miami share it, just to be fair, was 44 straight
44.
regionals. And now that those streaks, see if I can find it fast. Now that those streaks are over, I think the current streak is Vandy with
Vandy?
18. So it's like, Corbs, hang in there.
Almost halfway there.
We're going to need another
almost
22
halfway there.
seasons out of you. Hey, let's wrap with this, boys. So I want you to pick a team that when you went through this exercise, whether you wrote the team up or not, it was kind of like, I'm going to call it your aha team, where you had a bias or perception of this team. And as you wrote them up, you're like, dang, I'm too high on them. I'm too low on them, whatever. I'm going to pick the 2 Arizona schools, like Arizona State. When I looked at them, I just real quick, I'll just say they've only made 2 of the last 7 regionals. And that really hurt my heart to read that. Arizona's who I want to, and again, I'm encouraged. I'm going to see Arizona State this weekend, and I'm encouraged. I'm always optimistic, and I think they've got good players, and I think I'm excited to see what year 4 looks like under Willie Bloomquist. Arizona's the team. They're at 27, and what blew me away about Arizona when I wrote them up was they have 4 national titles, 4, and 1 in the 70s, 2 in the 80s, 2012. Only 4 programs have more than them. They have 18 College World Series appearances. Now, in fairness, Arizona's been streaky. If you look at the last decade, the 2010s, they missed 5 regionals. So, that's a lot of you're missing every other regional when I'm also talking about your national titles. But I also think about the current run they're on. They've made 4 straight regionals right now. They've hosted 2 of the last 4 years. They were a top 8 national seed in 21. Jay Johnson's last year there, I think his last year. And they kind of cruised to Omaha then. And I think I wrote this in their fall report, which I will put in the admin sooner than later. Their infrastructure is sneaky awesome. They've got an indoor batting cage, which a pitching lab. They've got a big league park. Even though it's off campus, the students have really embraced it. I think because the beers they sell there are literally like you could break your wrist carrying these beers. Like it is, you better stretch your forearms. It's awesome. It's a very party atmosphere. They have a lot going on. They've got great coaching there. So anyway, the more I dug into Arizona, the more I was like, you know what? I view them in good stead, but I felt like I had to take my game up a notch there for them. Who wants to go next? Joe, why don't you go next? You've been my 2-hole all night.
All right. I was kind of surprised to see Fullerton still in the top 60. They're at 58. I think we've all been pretty, understandably, I don't think we're wrong for this. I think we've been pretty down on Fullerton for a while and just kind of think similar to Rice, right? I mean, Fullerton maybe held on a little longer to being relevant at the top end of college baseball, but similar to Rice, where it's just like, man, what happened there? Like, why are they where they are? But to see them still there, told me 2 things. One is that I had totally, honestly, and I say this with no pride, it gives me no pleasure to say this. I had totally forgotten they made a regional 2 years ago. Like I totally forgot they made
Stanford,
the regional.
right?
And they to be fair, they made a regional as an automatic qualifier, even though they did not win.
Yeah, UCSD won it.
UC San Diego was not eligible.
Right. So, I just kind of totally forgotten that. But other than that, also, it's a little bit like Vanderbilt. It's different, right? I mean, I talked about, Vanderbilt almost won a national title in 2021. This is a little different than that, but you really don't have to go that far back to find some years when Fullerton was still right there. I mean, they're 1 win away from Omaha in 2018 as recently as 2018. One win away from Omaha. They didn't quite get there despite what was that? What was Jumbo's last name for
Jumbo
Fullerton?
Elliott? No, that's the offensive lineman.
No, he was an offensive lineman in the 90s.
I'm in the right genre.
Cowboys.
What was it, Fitzy?
Cowboys, right?
Sean Elliott.
All right, we'll look that up.
Sean Elliott played for the Spurs.
Stand by, Joe. I'm going to get you a name. Jumbo is
okay. All right, I'm going to filibuster for a second.
Chamberlain.
I think maybe it was Chamberlain.
That could be.
Fullerton fans are
Jumbo.
screaming.
Yeah, Jumbo Chamberlain.
Yeah. His magical home run for him to put Fullerton in position to move on. They fall one game short against Washington. That's the moral of the story. That was a lot of running in place to get to like a really small payoff there. But point is, you just really don't have to go that far back for times when Fullerton was right there. And did it feel kind of like they were getting away with something a little bit because they were kind of like above average teams that tended to play better in the postseason? Sure, but that's also kind of the point. You play well when it matters most. So I say that to say I'm holding out hope that Fullerton can maybe get things turned around and head in the right direction. Obviously, there's headwinds being not in one of the power conferences. They're all the reasons why we've talked a million times about the West Coast being not what it used to be. But I'm still hopeful that there might be a run for Fullerton at the top of the sport anyway.
Great pull, Jace Jumbo Chamberlain. Fitzy, go ahead.
Yeah,
There you
thank
go.
you.
Yeah.
Wow. That is a great pull. I forgot about that moment. It's a great moment. I'm going to throw out Illinois. I think that's one that it was one of our biggest climbers from 2 years ago. And it was kind of based primarily on the run that they made this year, which was, what they go 18-6 in the league or something. I mean, they had a great season in the Big Ten this year. But I was reading Patrick Ebert's fall report, and he made the point that it's easy to forget about that Illinois was, we named them the program of the decade for 2010 to 2019, the teens, when we did our decade package. They were the Big Ten program of the decade. And which, I mean, there's other candidates. Indiana was a candidate for that, but they were, they had some highs and they had probably more consistency than some other ones. Like, they've done some things there, and Dan Hartleb is now, I think, the dean of Big Ten coaches now that Coach Anderson is retired at Minnesota. And like they kind of, you can forget about Illinois sometimes, and then they just kind of jump up and have a good year. And it's I think it's hard in the Big Ten. We have not seen anyone since I've been doing this job. We've not really seen any Big Ten program like sustain that like top of the heap. It feels like they kind of they play leapfrog, right? I mean, Indiana had their run, and Illinois had their run, and Michigan, of course, and whatever. But like Illinois feels like they're just always kind of lying in the weeds, and they're easy to forget about. And so you look up, and all of a sudden they're up 30 spots from last time, which we didn't necessarily see coming. Maybe that was an overreaction, but anyway, that was one that kind of caught my eye.
I will say with them too. I think part of the reason why we overlook them sometimes is they still kind of win and operate in a way that was more familiar in the Big Ten if you go back 10 to 15 years. There was this phenomenon in the Big Ten where there'd be a team every year. Like this year's an Illinois year, and the next year is a Minnesota year, and the next year is a Michigan year. And then in between that, those teams would dip back down and then rebuild. And so there were like these teams that would go on these 3, 4, 5 year cycles. And we've kind of stopped that because of transfer portal, because of whatever. And so it's, it's Indiana, it's Michigan, it's, lately Maryland in that league. But Illinois still kind of operates that way. And it's like you can set your watch to it that once every 3, 4, 5 years, like Dan Hartleb's going to have a really good team that's going to challenge to win the league and get to a regional. My other thing here is that it is kind of amazing when you look at the Big Ten largely here that, and look, I don't get around the Big Ten as much in the last few years as say Patrick does, for example, but at least as far as I know, 3 of the toughest facility situations in the Big Ten, you have Rutgers, okay, but then you have Maryland, Iowa, and Illinois, which are 3 of maybe the 5 most consistent programs right now in the Big Ten, and Illinois part of that. They've got a great indoor now. I will grant them that, but it's not a great facility situation, and yet they continue to be able to recruit and they continue to develop, and I think that this is the payoff for that.
Love it. Kendall, give us one more. I've got a sneaky one at the end, but give us one more.
Yeah, I think Kentucky is one I really, you look at their climb. They went up 27 spots from the previous program rankings, and I just kind of go back to what Nick Mingione's done since that COVID year. I mean, they go 29, 23, and 21, 33 and 26 and 22. 2 years ago, super regional, not for Paul Skeens, they might be at Omaha. And then, of course, this past year, they get to the College World Series. I just think for a program like Kentucky, where basketball is king. Obviously, football is ultra popular as well. For him to cultivate that kind of program at the University of Kentucky is just incredibly impressive to me. It's interesting that them and Georgia are back to back, because I kind of consider both of those schools to be like artists at evaluating the portal. If you go back and look at like their hit rate, and you look at Georgia's hit rate in terms of the portal, it's extremely impressive. And so I think Kentucky, for me, is one that stands out. On the negative side, UCLA going down 19 spots to 40. I never probably would have thought that UCLA would end up at 40 in our program rankings at some point. In the modern era of college baseball, so them at 40. And I'll give you one more team that I think is one I'm concerned about. Is you mentioned earlier, what's a team that maybe as you went through the rankings, you're like, okay, maybe we were a little bullish, a little too bullish. Texas Tech for me is an interesting one, because they were easily in the top 20, and that's just a program. If you look at the last 2 years, they were 24 and 29 in the Big 12. I just kind of feel like their talent level has decreased just a little bit, and I worry about them a little bit with Oklahoma going the SEC, Texas going the SEC. There's a lot of SEC flavor in that state right now, and I'm a little worried about them. We'll see where they are in 2 years.
Big 12 is going to be fascinating in baseball. Like I think there's a wide range of outcomes for the Big 12 in baseball, and I think the good outcomes are, you've got some programs with some real pedigree and some real opportunities there. The school that jumped out at me too, I'll give you guys real quick. UC Irvine is at 51, and they've had a great run of coaches. They had John Savage, Dave Serrano, Mike Gillespie, now Ben Orloff. UC Irvine has averaged 39 wins a year under Ben Orloff. This blew me away. Irvine's record in NCAA tournament play is 30 and 21. That is an outrageously good record when you think about there's only so many wins available to you in the postseason, and you're guaranteed for 2. Like if you're going to have at least 2 losses. So if you start looking at people's postseason records, they're typically very close to 500. And for them to be 30 and 21, now that speaks to went to Omaha in 2007, went to a super regional the next year, went to Omaha in 2014. They've had some real good track record right there.
That's a good one. I meant to suggest before this show that we should do a buy or sell stock game. And then I went back and looked to see if we did that 2 years ago. And I'm combing through all of these spreadsheets with our various games from our podcast with no accountability. Nobody's ever totaled up who won or lost all these stock games. So I'm just going to let you guys off the hook.
All right.
Nobody has to make any predictions. But if you have to buy one right now, you got to pick one team on this ranking that you think will increase in 2 years the most. Who are you buying?
Arizona State.
This is off the cuff. Arizona State. All right.
Increase the most.
Yeah, from where they are right now. Like your stock speculator. Yeah. You want to see if his program 70. Like, are they going to go 30 spots? Like what? That's
ASU way better than 45. I see good things in their future.
I like it.
I'm going to go. This is tough because the higher you go in the rankings, the less value you get, right? Like that's how this game works. Like I'm not saying anything like revolutionary because it's easy to go like A&M. They've got all kinds of resources. They're clearly like really well set up, but like they don't have that much further to climb.
How could you not pick Tennessee right now, Joe?
I will stay in the state of Texas though. I'm going to go Houston. They're 86 right now. We did 35 spots down from last time. We debated them like possibly lower. We debated higher just because it's like, well, it's not that long ago since they made some regionals, but obviously they're in a better league now. They've got some things. Obviously the location works for them. And I think we're at a point now with the current regime that it's going to go one of two ways. Either this current regime led by Todd Whitting is going to get it sorted out and figured out, and they're going to, obviously make a move up these rankings, or obviously there's going to be a change at the top and they're going to, replace him. And then that coach will be set up to maybe do some better things down the road. So I think one way or the other, I think Houston's going to be a team that's going to make a move.
I like that. I'll give you one, buy you some more time to think about it, Kendall. I haven't read your fall report yet, Joe, but I know it's in the hopper on the Missouri State Bears. But I'm pretty excited about that value with the number 77 ranked team, given the current complexion of the Missouri Valley Conference. Now that, Indiana State's, we'll see how it goes without Mitch Hannes. Joe, you have your hand
Their
raised.
outro, right?
A reminder, they're going to CUSA after this year.
Okay. Listen, can we just scratch that? Who can keep track?
No.
Who can even keep
But hang
track?
on.
Who can
But
say?
hang on. So I will
Maybe
say,
they are.
I'm gonna support you. I'm gonna support you on this point. I think Joey Hawkins is like one of the young rising coaches in the industry, for one.
That's where I was going.
For two, take this as a bit of data. And this is on the top of the mind because I literally just finished this fall report writing it today. Caden Bogenpool is a guy who could have named his location in the offseason if he had gotten in the portal, wanted to go somewhere else. The secret is out on that guy. Like he can throw almost 100 miles an hour from the mound. He hits the ball 100 miles an hour at the plate. He plays center field. He can run. He can throw. Like he's if it's done on a baseball field, he's good at it. He's still there. Zach Stewart is their starting right fielder. Like I have kind of heard that he was being looked at as a top 5 round draft pick. He wanted, more money than that was going to bring. So he's back at Missouri State. Now, I think we can make some assumptions about what that means, that Missouri State is serious about whether it's competitive in the NIL space or whatever it is. Like Missouri State is serious about keeping their players there. Now, will they do that 100% of the time in this current climate? Probably not. That's just life in the mid-majors. But the fact that those two guys could have gone anywhere and they're back in Springfield, I think is really good news, not just for 2025, but beyond.
And it's a program that in our previous rankings has been in the 40s, 50s, even they got as high as 37 over the last decade. Like there's upside there. They've done it before. I like Hawkins a lot, like you said, as a young rising star. So give me Missouri State as a program I'm buying.
Yeah, and what is a conference anymore anyway, Fitzy? Like what is?
Yeah, who cares? Who even cares about that?
Who cares?
Kendall, what say you?
Well, right on brand. I'm going to pick 2 programs here. I'm
From
going to say
the
entire state.
Yeah.
I'm going to say Ohio State at 91. Justin Hare was a consummate winner at Campbell. He knows the formula. He's a Hamilton, Ohio guy. I just feel really good about him in that job. I think he's going to make a move with them. And then Cincinnati at 96. Jordan Bishel has won big everywhere he's been. He obviously exceeded expectations by a significant margin last year at Cincinnati. So I feel pretty confident in those guys being well above 96 in the next iteration.
Let me just say how disgusting it is to see candidate Rogers pandering to the swing state voters in the state of Ohio on his way out here. Listen, you don't have my vote, Kendall. Yes. Sorry, you're not getting it.
And you better lock up Mr. Bishel, by the way, because he is, that's.
I don't think it's going to matter if you lock him up. If like an SEC school comes, he's gone anyway.
Well said. Gentlemen, well done. This was excellent. I want to plug the Sunday Night Conversations. We have 4 left. I told you that Joe and I have the bookend one on Wayne Graham, the OG at Rice. This week, it'll be Jack Leggett and myself talking about the ACC past, present, and future. I love his perspective. The coaches, if for that show, think about the coaches Jack Leggett coached against. Obviously, he's got a Hall of Fame resume, but think about the coaches you coached against if you were in the ACC during that time. It's a who's who. It's like a Mount Rushmore every weekend. And then we've got one on Air Force, CJ Gilman and Ryan Forrest. Air Force has 2 pitchers in the big leagues. Think about that. Like when you recruit kids, you're basically saying, by the way, you're done playing baseball after this. And they have 2 pitchers in the big leagues. And then we've got a cool one on Nebraska. The teams that went to Omaha in 1, 2, and 5. I've got Justin Seeley and Will Bolton, RD Spees. that are we're gonna just break that down. Obviously, it's kind of a DVH podcast in some ways. He now has been to Omaha 9 times, and so yeah, I'm fired up for that one. So
disappointed you couldn't get the Hawaiian Punch Out Shane Kamini, but
he was amazing. Gosh, he was good. So, gentlemen, well done. Great to see you. This was super fun. The top 100 programs, very fun exercise. And again, we love the feedback. Like, bring the feedback. It's really, those are fun conversations. That is it. Everybody have a great week, and we will catch you next time on the D1 Baseball Podcast.